Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Every Day is a Story All Its Own. And boy, I have a treat for you tonight, a true master storyteller with a specialty in Route 66. I'm gonna do a little show and tell here. This is kind of cool. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind, but in early 2023, I was doing some consulting work for a production company, multimedia immersive production company, and I was really resurrected my interest in Route 66, which I had traveled most of it, Oklahoma, through into Arizona in 1997 in a pivotal time in my life. And at the end of the route there, where I stopped in Arizona, was my now bride of 28 years. It'll be December 26th, so coming up this month. So anyhow, my interest and love in Route 66 got renewed. And I finished that consulting job. I went to another consulting job in part because of the work that I had done on the Route 66 stuff. So it was time to really get into the research. And there were three books that I was told that I really should read, or three authors. So one, of course, was Michael Wallace's book about Route 66, which is credited with reviving interest in Route 1960, Route 66 in 1990. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Another one was Joe Sonderman, and I read his Then and Now. It's a wonderful book. But I read this book because, I'm interested in all things kind of darker side. So I chose this one, Murder and Mayhem on the Main Street of America, Tales from Bloody 66. There are some absolutely chilling highway robbery, highway abduction, murder, car accidents, gangsters, you name it, it's in here. Fascinating, from Chicago out to California. And this is by a man named Jim Hinckley, who is my guest tonight. So about 16 months later, I got invited to present at Roadfest in Tulsa. Very big deal, big event, great draw. And Jim was on the docket. And I found out that not only would I be able to meet him, meet Joe Sonderman, meet Michael Wallace, but I got to sit on a panel with Jim Hinckley and Joe Sonderman. I tried my best to hold my own, but two absolute luminaries. Jim's going to tell you how long he's been interested in all this. Now, since that time, I've read Jim's Ghost Towns of 66. Awesome book. And this is brand new, hot off the presses. My mom got me this for my birthday, November 4th. It came on November 5th. I think it came out on November 4th or November 5th. Jim is the editor of this, and several people that I've met, Route 66, and I'm sure Jim will tell you this, Route 66, people are so generous. They're so giving. It's wonderful. It's America's Main Street. Any place you stop, just by fact that you have 66 in common, folks will talk to you, spend time with you. It's amazing. So Cheryl Eicher Jett wrote Illinois. Joe Sonderman wrote Missouri. Reese Martin, who's absolutely killing in Oklahoma. This is the Oklahoma Route 66 Association t-shirt. Reese wrote the chapter on Oklahoma, and I'm about to get into Texas. This is an amazing book. If you are interested in realignments, how the route was decided, how it got rerouted when the slab came in and all. So enough about that. I'm going to play our little intro. I'm going to read Jim's short bio, and then I'm going to introduce you. You're going to get to spend an hour with the man himself. So welcome to Every Day is a Story. Short and sweet and simple. And here we go. Jim Hinckley's association with Route 66 dates to the summer of 1959, when his family traveled west to Arizona from Norfolk, Virginia. In 1966, his family relocated to Arizona from Michigan and built a house along the pre-1952 alignment of Route 66 near Kingman. He learned to ride a bicycle and to drive on that old highway. Those experiences are the foundation for his passion for sharing America's story and inspiring road trips that have been made manifest in through hundreds of featured articles, more than 20 books, including the Route 66 Encyclopedia, and presentations made internationally. In partnership with his wife, Judy, they have transformed that passion into Jim Hinckley's America, a multifaceted network that includes the acclaimed Coffee with Jim podcast, which I have had the honor to be on twice. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the only man that I know who is living and has a statue in the town where he lives, Jim Hinckley. Good evening, my friend.
Well, that kind of introduction, I will need a bigger hat. That's
well deserved.
You could swell a fella's head like that.
Hey, swell away. You are one of the men, and it's got to be pretty amazing that you have been doing this, doing it. There's a resurgence. Interest kind of ebbs and flows, but now this centennial that they've been building to for years, you're one of a handful of people, 6, 7, 8 people who are the go-to people. So I appreciate you taking some time to spend an hour with me tonight.
Oh, you betcha. You betcha, Joey. God bless. I always enjoy our conversations.
Me too. So just take us, I said a little bit, but really, how did you come to devote a good part, a massive part, a major part of your life to this Route 66?
Well, it's, you can cue the Twilight Zone music at any point in the story, but basically everything in my life of importance has been tied to Route 66 since 1959. And yes, I am that old. And I didn't really get into Route 66. I was kind of a latecomer. Everything I've done with Jim Hinckley's America, my books, is built on the real pioneers, the work of the pioneers like Michael Wallace, Jerry McClanahan, Jim Ross, Shelley Graham. That's it. But for me, when the road was bypassed, I kept driving Route 66 because I liked it. I liked the people. It felt comfortable. And I was usually driving something so old and decrepit that they didn't want it on the interstate highway anyhow. And so I started out with my writing actually with the chronicling the evolution of the American auto industry from 1885 through World War II. And there started being overlap. I started getting asked in the 90s, I started getting asked more and more about Route 66, the connection with Lewis Chevrolet, Edsel Ford, these different things. So one thing led to another, and here we are.
All right. Well, you mentioned you're an expert on the automobile, and I've been honored to see you speak live a couple of times. And you always bring up a wonderful factoid because everyone talks about the Tesla, the electric car. Jim, tell the audience, when was the first electric cars?
It's always surprises people, but electric cars they were really one of the foundations. Ferdinand Porsche, his first vehicles were electric. Studebaker started out with an electric car designed by Thomas Edison as they started to morph from production of horse-drawn vehicles. But it's kind of ironic. Automobiles in general, but specifically electrical vehicles, we owe them, the foundation is the manure crisis. This isn't bullshit. It's there was
horseshit.
Yes, there was an actual manure crisis in the mid 1890s, and New York City was not alone. It was a lot of major cities all over the world, but New York commissioned a study about the growing urban crisis of manure. Something like 2.5 million pounds of horse manure were being taken off the streets of New York a month. Plus there's the urine, plus the dead horses that were left on the street. Sometimes the city didn't pick up for a week. So people like Ransom E. Olds started proposing, ironically, that the solution for the pollution was the automobile. And initially it was electric vehicles. As early as the 1898, 1899 period, we had electric taxi cabs and buses in New York City. My pa always said, better to fill your head with useless knowledge than no knowledge at all. The first person struck and killed by an automobile in the United States was a fellow named Bliss, struck and killed by an electric taxi cab in 1898. And as early into the mid first decade of the 20th century, In some places like Boston, cities in the Northeast, it was easier to find a place to charge your batteries than it was to buy gasoline. And electric vehicles made sense for urban use, big cities, not so much in rural areas like Grants, New Mexico, where they didn't even have electricity in the town till 1928. But they were marketed heavily towards the cars were marketed heavily towards women because they were extremely easy to operate. You didn't have to crank start. You didn't have to juggle all these things. And even Clara Ford, Henry Ford's wife, they didn't advertise this much, but she drove a Detroit Electric.
Wow.
They didn't advertise that for obvious reasons. But we had electric trucks, electric buses. And as late as 1916, the Woods Company was experimenting with electrics. And there is one in the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, just off Route 66. It was called the Woods Dual Power. And it was a gasoline electric hybrid produced in 1916, advertised as the car that soils the air less.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. So for the audience that doesn't know, I'm really taking a crash course in the birth of Route 66. I've learned so much from folks like you. So it starts with these trails that are indigenous trails, the military, the explorers, the westward expansion, Pony Express, trails begin to develop even more. Then we get into the cattle, the railroads, all this kind of stuff. People know the Ozark Trail, people know the Chisholm Trail, so on and so forth. 1926, the route is born following the American Wheelman. You did a great introduction in the new book, reminding me again that this all really started with the bicycle, the Good Roads movement.
Yeah, it did. In fact, we could go back even further to 1830 when Senator Henry Clay pitched the American Plan, which was to build a government-funded infrastructure for development of the interior of the United States. And that resulted in creation of the National Road and things like the Erie Canal. And then it kind of took a backseat as the railroad came into prominence. But by the mid 1880s, bicycles, and it's interesting, if you look at the early bicycle advertisements, 1885 to 1895, they're almost word for word identical to what was used for the early automobiles. They started pitching when the safety bicycle, that's the modern bicycle. We got away from the old penny farthings, the ones with the big front wheel, the small back wheel, the perfect device for getting in shape and committing suicide at the same time. The safety bicycle it was heavily promoted as the ultimate transportation for the individual. It was cheaper than a horse. You didn't have to maintain it. You could do things. And it became a tsunami of interest. And I mean, huge. We went from something like 20 bicycle manufacturing companies in 1890 to 300 companies in 1895. Wow. And we had bicycle clubs all over the United States by the early 1890s. Incredible places. Laramie, Wyoming in 1890 had a bicycle club. We had a guy manufacturing bicycles in Laramie, Wyoming, and organizing tours. One of his tours in 1893, and we just had Geronimo's surrender shortly before that. We had the Wounded Knee Massacre. This fella is organizing bicycle trips from Laramie, Wyoming to the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893.
Wow.
But the problem was not only a lack of roads, but there was restrictions, almost the same ones that automobilists faced. Bicycles weren't allowed on certain public roads. They were deemed a hazard. So the League of American Wheelmen was formed as a lobbying organization and to promote bicycling. And so bicycling, the League of American Wheelmen, and the League of American Wheelwomen, the women's chapter, kind of was the foundation for the Good Roads movement, which gave rise to the highway. And an argument could easily be made. It was also a cornerstone for the establishment of the auto industry. A lot of the early automotive pioneers started out with bicycles, like Louis Chevrolet.
Yeah, you do a wonderful job in the opening. Again, I'm going to keep, of course, plugging this book. It's just out now. I bet
Thank
it's
you.
doing very well. Yeah, I was surprised. I read Jim and Shelley's book, Route 66, the first 100 years. And of course, I was really excited to read your book. I was looking forward. You got all the, Illinois and Missouri and Oklahoma, the people who know the route absolutely so well. And it's amazing because you're focusing, even though everyone's talking about, oh yeah, this famous place and this hotel and this restaurant and this and all that, you really talk a lot about the alignments, the realignments, the rerouting. So as this thing was born in 1926, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but even by the 1930s they were starting to make realignments and adjustments
Yeah.
to the original mapped out route.
I think the first communities bypassed by Route 66 realignment was in 29 and 30. It was Goffs, California, and Depew, Oklahoma, were the first communities bypassed. Because the road was in a constant state of evolution, and it still is, but it was evolving to meet an ever increasing, just a groundswell of automobile ownership and travel. I believe I don't have the numbers in front of me, so if I'm wrong, don't use this on Jeopardy. You might lose. But in 1909, if I remember right, we produced like 290,000 automobiles and 1.5 million horse-drawn vehicles. And in 1929, we produced 4.5 million automobiles and only 20,000 horse-drawn vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do know as they were gearing up 1925, 1926, when Cyrus Avery, who I'm portraying, was really involved in the joint numbering board and all that kind of stuff. 1.5 million tags in the United States. I do know that number sticks in my mind. And commensurate amount of accidents and fatalities, and that was really driving what I love. And Cyrus talks about it a lot. And when I gave my little preview of him in June, he talked about it because it was so important. This also really gave rise to the state, federal, local partnership. Federal government saying, this is important. We'll put in money, matching funds, but you all have to get together. You need to raise your money. So these associations would, if you could talk a little bit to the audience about the trail associations. I know when they had that first joint numbering board meeting in 1925, 250 trail associations in the United States. I know you all talk about them a little bit in the book. Can you tell the folks how those trail associations operated?
Well, it was a Wild West situation, and it was built on the success of the League of American Wheelmen. But basically, some of it was just pure scams, money driven. A guy would come into town, promise you all this economic prosperity. All you got to do is pay our association so many dollars, we'll build a road. And that never happened. And others, the roads would change literally overnight. Kingman, Arizona has a road coming in on one of the trails, and Kingman doesn't pay their dues this year, so we reroute it through Wickiup. So on Wednesday, the road goes through Kingman, but on Thursday, it's through Wickiup. We had these organizations coming together trying to get a handle on this very early. The Automobile Club of Southern California was established, I believe, in 1899, and AAA was established about 1903, trying to get a handle on this. But some of the big ones, they were cooperative, sometimes corporate sponsored, usually community sponsored. If they could get an endorsement from the Good Roads Association, that helped. But they were largely, even the main established trails or roads, highways, Lincoln Highway, for example, the Border Ocean to Ocean Highway, or the National Old Trails Road, were largely highways or roads in name only. They really didn't amount to anything. Signage was insane. They put out these guidebooks that look for the blue stripe on telegraph poles, turn left at the bridge that used to be painted yellow. Just all these crazy things. And you had people like a fellow in Montana put together a national parks trail to Yellowstone, and it made an insane loop for over 100 miles through the worst country for one reason: so his brother could see cars and sell gasoline. Yeah. It was just a free for all. And to show you how bad the roads were, well, these trail associations were unable to maintain and develop these roads. It was just an impossibility to keep up on this. In 1915, the summer of 1915, Edsel Ford, and Edsel, the man, not the car that looks like a Buick sucking a lemon. It was Henry Ford's son. He and his college buddies took a trip west to California, and like a lot of Route 66 tourists, they followed the National Old Trails Road through the Southwest because they wanted to see Native American culture, painted desert, the Grand Canyon, these kind of things. And his journal for July 16th, 1915, he notes leaving Williams, Arizona that morning and arriving in Kingman at midnight, 153 miles. He considered it a good day's run because he only had 2 flat tires and 1 broken spring. Yeah. It was insane. And what prevented this, what's interesting, going back to Henry Clay, the proposal had been made and started with the national road to have a national highway system. The railroad initially worked with the League of American Wheelmen and Bicycles. They started offering bicycle tourism. One fella invented a folding bicycle, and there was tour packages, take your bicycle on the train and do things. But as the automobile started coming up, this was a threat to the railroad. The League of American Wheelmen started working with grange associations, farming associations, to create better roads and petition and lobby for roads. Some of the states got involved, others didn't. And one of the arguments that was pushed was a federal highway system would be infringement on states' rights, and it would open the gateway for socialism. I always find that interesting. So it took quite a few years for people, visionaries like Cyrus Avery, to push this. Wisconsin kind of led the pack in the late teens. They became the first state to create a numbered road system. Even though it was still trail associations, they were putting numbers with these trails, because otherwise all you had was a blue stripe on a telegraph pole or a sign painted on the side of a barn that might burn down on Wednesday. It was total chaos. So the trail system was very important. And when the U.S. highway system was first established, for obvious reasons, they utilized a lot of the existing trail system. The National Old Trails Road Association was still in use. They were still very functional as late as 1928-29. And at that time, a fellow from Missouri by the name of Harry Truman was the president of that association. So, yeah, the early years were just fascinating. And it's even more incredible when you consider how poor these roads were, the amount of travel. The year Edsel Ford went to California, Emily Post also went to California on a similar trip. She wrote a best-selling book called By Motor to the Golden Gate. But it's estimated that more than 20,000 people from outside the state of California attended the Panama Pacific Exposition in 1915, and they arrived by automobile.
Yeah.
It's just astounding, especially when you think 1915. And to back this story up a little bit, 20 years before that, just 20 years, 1895, nobody knew what an automobile was. A Duryea motor wagon was given top billing over the albino, the dog-faced boy, and the fat lady at Barnum and Bailey Circus.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, here we are.
It's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of the highway And there's an irony embedded in this, and this is really, and people probably won't be surprised. Going back to Lincoln, he said communication, security, economic prosperity was the railroads. Well, when we flash forward to 1919, 1920, we have these military vehicles, right? The military always adopts everything.
Yeah.
So a young lieutenant colonel named Dwight David Eisenhower leads in 1919 the transcontinental convoy. The first one was the Lincoln Highway. The second one was the Bankhead Highway, I believe. I think I'm getting that right. And they did pretty well leaving the East Coast, but by the time they got out towards your territory, New Mexico, Arizona, they were mired. They were stuck, and this became a very, very big deal. And I believe that juiced this motivation to get these highways in order, get them. Then we fast forward 20 something years, 25 years, and we're in World War II. And Jim, I have just been astonished from your books, others research that I've done. We had, of course, military bases. We had POW camps in really large numbers along Route 66. You want to talk about the World War II years a little bit for us and how Route 66 was very important to it?
Yeah, World War II was transitional for, of course, the entire world. But on the Route 66 corridor, there was major changes made. A great example is in Missouri, the old Devil's Elbow section. It was a very narrow, beautiful section of road. The bridge there had been built over the Big Piney River had been built in 23. But when they started construction of Fort Leonard Wood, it just didn't work for the transport, the shipping. So that became the Hooker's Cut, one of the biggest highway development projects at that time. And that was the useless knowledge thing. That was the first and last 4-lane alignment of Route 66 in Missouri. In Illinois, World War II led to the creation of bypass alignments, that instead of going through towns, you had alignments going around towns to expedite traffic. Some were 4-lane alignments, a precursor to the interstate highway system. The POW camps, you had military bases established all along Route 66 because of Route 66, as well as, especially in the West and in Illinois, the railroad was right along Route 66. So you had the two transportation corridors. Kingman, we had establishment of the Kingman Army Airfield during World War II, which became one of the largest flexible gunnery schools in the United States. And that's on Route 66. A real interesting, you mentioned POW camps. A real fascinating little relic on Route 66 is Fort Reno, outside of El Reno, Oklahoma, on Route 66. This was established 1870-ish, the Comanche Wars and whatnot. We had the African-American Buffalo Soldiers were stationed there. And then it remained an active military installation up until the early 1950s. World War I era, World War II, and the Korean War era, it was the place where they trained mules for military use. As late as through World War II, but there was also POW camp. And to the best of my knowledge, the only official German and Italian military cemeteries are at Fort Reno along Route 66. You have the territorial Oklahoma cemetery. You have a segregated cemetery because there's African-American soldiers buried there, and they couldn't be buried with, another wild story. And then there's a small separation area, and you have German and Italian POWs buried in the cemetery. In the desert, the Mojave Desert, the largest military training exercise, I think, in history, was as General Patton got ready for the invasion of North Africa. The entire Mojave Desert almost became a huge military training center. And it included what became the Marine Corps base over at 29 Palms is a relic. But for example, Goffs, California, the old schoolhouse, became a PX and a kitchen, a mess hall. And the El Garces Harvey House in Needles became a quasi headquarters for General Patton for a while during these maneuvers. So World War II really changed things a lot. And then, of course, gas rationing curtailed a lot of travel on the road, which affected businesses almost as hard as the interstate highway did a decade later. Right. So, but World War II was transformative. A lot of new bridges were put in. The highway was widened. It was straightened. A lot of improvements were made.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Fort Reno's named Jesse Reno, right? The Civil War general, I believe.
Yeah, they died at Antietam.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was killed.
Yeah, my head is filled with not as much useless knowledge of you. You're a little older than I am, but I'm trying to play catch up here. What I love and what I want to transition to now, well, it's ironic. I said there's always this irony. So Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower, he does the transcontinental, which kind of gets all these highways, Route 66 going. 54 though, he's been in Europe. He's seen the West German Autobahn. He's very interested in this national highway system, right, that comes about. And that really begins to, it took about 15 years or so for it to really happen. But that was really the early death knell for Route 66 in a lot of ways, that highway system coming in. Yeah. With some of you guys, I don't know if you do, but I know Michael Wallace and others call it the slab.
Yeah. I think it was Charles Corral who said that with the interstate highway, it was now possible to drive coast to coast and see absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But it was a necessary evil. It unfortunately, it was, because Route 66, well, you take the pre-52 alignment of Route 66 through Oatman, up through there. That's the sharpest grades and the sharpest curves and the steepest grades anywhere on Route 66. That was in use until 1952. And in 1939, the state of Arizona, for the first time, clocked 1 million vehicles entering the state of Arizona on Route 66. And so think what it was in the post-war years on that narrow old road. It wasn't sustainable. It just flat wasn't sustainable.
Yeah. Jim, that hair, with all the switchbacks and all that hair raising stuff there that you mentioned, is that where people would drive their car up the hill backwards to keep the gas flowing into the carburetor? Is that same area, or is that someplace else?
No, it was there. It was all those places. The reason for that, people they think all the cars were like that. It was basically a Ford problem, because Henry Ford refused to change and update anything. He saw no reason. So selling a Ford in 1921, 2 or 3 would be kind of like trying to sell Atari game systems and Commodore computers today. When it was insane. And most cars had fuel pumps by 1923, 24, or they had a vacuum pump, so you had consistent fuel pressure. The reason you had to back up the hills backwards on the pre-26 Model Ts is because there was no fuel pump and the gas tank is under the seat. So you've got gravity feed tanks. That's all you've got. Yeah. After 26, they put the gas tank. It was still gravity feed, but they put the gas tank, like with Model A Fords, up against the windshield. And so that made a difference. But the Model T4 that you bought in, I think it was 1912, the electric starter was introduced on the Cadillac. Aftermarket starters were available for Fords, but as a factory installed item, I believe it was 1924 before you could get an electric starter for a Ford.
Wow.
And if I get long-winded, stop me, because I've been told I can do this for hours, even if I'm the only one in the room, and enjoy myself.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Keep going.
Ford was, when the Model T came out about 1909, it was a highly advanced automobile. But automotive technology was changing at a rapid pace. And there were almost the 1920 Model T was almost identical to the 1919 Model T or 1909 Model T. In 1920, 3 out of 5 vehicles in the world were Ford products. And by 1925, Ford had lost 75% of his market share. And he still refused to change. So what he did, he came up with a brilliant strategy, thinking instead of changing the car, we'll sell it cheaper. I believe it was $845 for a touring car in 1909. And in 25, it was like $285. You could buy a brand new Ford. But the catch was, when you went into the Ford dealership to buy a new $285 Ford, the salesman would look at you and go, Joey, I don't feel comfortable selling you this car. You've got kids. You should have doors. Do you want doors for this car? Doors were extra. The roads are bad. You should have a spare tire. You really should. Now, do you want a rim to go with the spare tire? And I mean, literally everything became an option. And but it wasn't enough. And finally, Edsel Ford convinced his father that, look, this isn't going to work. So Henry just pulled the plug on the whole place, sent everybody home, shut all the factory down, everything. And in about 8 months, they came up with the Model A Ford.
Wow.
Pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah. I think I'm going to give a 45-second perspective of me as still a relative newbie. But then I'm going to turn the question over to you for a much more comprehensive and astute answer. But for me, why the route is still relevant all these years later is because there's so many layers to it, right? You have the Green Book. So you have the African Americans traveling, the whole sundown town thing. You have all kinds of crazy innovations, from massive roadside attractions. You have Lester Dill, who did the Merrimack Cabins and is credited with the bumper sticker. You have Ted Drews with the concrete. You can hold the custard upside down. Got the corn dog, which was a Navy fellow. So it has all these different layers where you go, oh yeah, but it's really about the bicycles and driving cars backwards uphill. And why, Jim, to you, why do you keep showing up, creating books, getting out on the road, which you are all the time? Why now, 100 years later, where it's been a decommissioned highway for what, 50 years almost? Darn near?
1985.
Oh, okay, 85, right. So 40 years. Why is Route 66 so relevant and core to America?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, this highway doesn't exist, like you mentioned. Officially, it doesn't exist. But yet we have an international fan club. We have got Route 66 associations all over the world. In my new book, Dries Bessels, founder of the Dutch Route 66 Association, wrote a chapter about the Renaissance. The reason you and I are talking today about Route 66 is the work of Cyrus Avery and his crew. They did such a good job of marketing this road. And then this road is 66 is not our most historic or most scenic highway, but from its inception, it's always had the best press and publicity. It was featured in a 4-part series on the I Love Lucy show. It was the Bunyan Derby. It was the road to the 1932 Olympics, Easy Rider, all these things. But there's another aspect to Route 66. Route 66 is the American story, the American experience made manifest. Every single aspect of our national story is in this road. Is the pre-37 alignment up through Santa Rosa to Santa Fe in New Mexico, goes through a little village of San Jose, little farming town. The chapel in that town was built in 1826. The road in front of that chapel was the Santa Fe Trail. It was the National Old Trails Road, and it was Route 66. In western New Mexico, just off Route 66, is the village of Acoma. That is the oldest continuously inhabited community in the United States. People have lived there for over 1,000 years. So our entire story is Civil War battlefields, Native American trade routes, the Beale Wagon Road with his camel caravan in the 1850s. This is all woven right into the Route 66 story. So it is the story of immigrants, then, now, and in the future. The immigration story is wrapped up deeply in Route 66. Our entire national story is manifest in this highway.
Yeah. The Harvey houses.
Right,
which are fascinating, and the rise of the full service gas station, and amazing architecture, and places like the Coral Motel, where you have a little bit of mafia and some tragedy with the kidnapping, and I mean, as a storyteller for me, and a guy who, like, well, you know, the very first book of yours that I read was Murder and Mayhem, so that's the way my mind works. But let's talk about the centennial. What I love about the centennial, the 100th birthday, which will officially be November 11th in 2026. Although they let's back up just a second. It was supposed to be Route 60, and I just have this gut feeling that 66 has a energetic resonance that 60 doesn't have, and it was meant to be, right?
Get your kicks on US 60. It loses something in translation.
It does. And Phillips 66, right? So named, right? Wade Phillips, a buddy of Cyrus Avery's. They were all oil men in Oklahoma, Tulsa, which is why Route 66, you know, if you look at the joint numbering system and you look at those highways, Route 66 is very wonky, because Cyrus was going to hell or high water. That was going to go through Tulsa, right past his cafe,
imagine that,
general store, and his gas station. Hey, he said, I might be stupid, I may be a fool, but I'm not a crook. And I believe his heart was in the right place. But Phillips 66 gasoline, they were looking for a name or whatever. And Wade's guy calls him on the phone, says, we're out here doing testing. We're on 66, going 66 miles an hour, and the relative weight of the gasoline is 66. So they made it Phillips 66. So again, that 60 wouldn't have happened. Phillips 60? Nah. So, I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, meant to be. And Cyrus fought a hard battle and made a lot of enemies, because they took 60, and then Kentucky Governor Fields was like, we don't have a highway ending in 0. This is bull crap. We want 60. And Cyrus was like, yeah, we'll take 62. And then he woke up and went, oh, hell no, we won't. And then finally someone said to him, 5 months later, and he had made enemies of congressmen, and people were begging him. Markham, I think, high up in the government, said, look, they're about to collapse this whole thing. Like, they're disgusted. And somebody said, look, Cy, 66 isn't taken. And he said, 66, we'll take it. So that was wild. So the centennial, what does it mean to you personally? What are you planning for the centennial? What does it mean to you?
Well, you know, this is kind of another one of those fortuitous anniversary situations. For almost 100 years, Route 66 has been marketed as the main street of America, ever since the U.S. Highway 66 Association. By the way, Cyrus Avery borrowed that marketing campaign from Judge Lowe, who had marketed the National Trails Road as the main street of America. But I digress.
Oh, yeah. He sure did.
So we have the main street of America, Route 66. Next year is also the 250th anniversary of the United States. Can you think of a better place to celebrate that than on the main street of America? And for me personally, I have no idea. Ever since COVID, 2020, the year of the apocalypse, long-term planning is, what are we doing for breakfast in the morning? I've learned that things are subject to change. But I'll be in Needles for the Route 66 Info Fair in February. And I've got 3 or 4 presentations here. And I've got some other projects in the works. I may be at Road Fest in Tulsa. And
me too, I hope.
I'm open for suggestions.
Yeah, I hear you. I really hope you and I can do an evening where you get to talk to Cyrus Avery. That would be amazing.
That would be great. I would love that immensely.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead,
I fell behind, and I gotta do this before I get too much older. But I've had it in my head for years, and no, I wasn't kicked in the head by a mule, not recently. But I've had this idea to travel Route 66 in a Model A Ford, and I had hoped to do it in the Centennial, but that's not going to happen. So soon maybe.
That would be cool. I got to do a photo shoot in a 22 Packard from the Heart of Route 66 Museum down in Sapulpa in Oklahoma. I got to spend the day, and because Cy had a pack, we don't know if it was a 22, 23, or 24. He loved that car. That's when he was riding high. He fell on some hard times. I put something up there on the screen. Longtime friend of the show, Charles, talked about, of course, the show Route 66. Most people don't know very few episodes actually took place on Route 66.
Just a handful of episodes. Yeah.
Amazing. So talk to us, because I think it's really important. Like I said, I was my life completely blew up on me. I had never been further west than Atlanta, Georgia, and I decided to go out and take a job managing a live theater in Arizona. And that's when I first, in 1997, rode Route 66, cried most of the way through Oklahoma, saw beautiful things, almost stopped in the Texas Panhandle. There's a wonderful, the poet Charles Bukowski wrote a poem about just stopping. A snowy night, gets off a bus. That was me, Jim. I had a date with destiny to go out to Arizona, and I went across that Texas Panhandle and the arroyos and all of that, and I was like, I just want to get a job. Like I had paid my way through college working in a restaurant. I just want to be a short order cook. I just want to disappear like for a year. Route 66 has that effect on you. Now, luckily I kept going. And now I have my co-pilot, who's going to be my wife of almost 28 years. Tanya's going to be my co-pilot on the road next year during my Psy adventures. You have a co-pilot as well. Why don't you talk about what that means to you a little?
Well, I wouldn't be doing this, any of this, if it wasn't for my dearest friend. And she's up for sainthood this year because she's put up with me for 43 years of marriage. We've been together 45 years. And yeah, she's the one that encouraged me to do this. She said, I had to encourage me to tell stories. And I started thinking that people for years have been telling me that I had a gift for telling people where to go. And so I combined the two and started writing, but she has been instrumental in all of this. She was a photographer for a lot of my books, my projects, and we have had the most amazing adventures together. I mentioned as an example that she's up for sainthood. My mom said I was born 90 and I never seemed to age. But to show you how bad this was, when my wife and I were courting, and I say this is 43 years ago, I was still doing rodeo and ranch work. And I drove a 1946 GMC pickup. And so when I'd come into town, at the time I was working out of Chino Valley, Arizona, the interstate highway had been completed to Kingman from Seligman. But I drove Old 66 because I liked it. And my old pickup truck wasn't suitable for the interstate. The speedometer didn't work, but I could tell when I got up to 45 miles an hour because it started throwing oil up on the windshield.
Oh, boy.
But to keep it classy, and so when we started dating, I had a 26 Ford touring car here in Kingman, and so we would double date, go to the drive-in, and do things in a 26 Ford, and that's how this whole thing started. But her family has a very long connection to Route 66. Her grandfather, let's see if I've got this here. Her great-grandfather was a sheriff out of Tombstone, Arizona. And this is his 41 caliber Colt revolver.
Oh, whoa.
from Tombstone. And her father was actually born in Tombstone. And he was raised by his grandparents. And they had a hotel in Tombstone that burned. So they had some family up here around Kingman. They came up to Kingman and bought an auto court and a little store on Route 66 in 1946. So my wife, her family, and then all of her uncles, grandfathers, and her father all worked on road construction projects in the 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s here in Arizona. A lot of that was Route 66. So, but without Judy, I never would have done this. I've always loved books. I read constantly. I dreamed of being a writer when I grew up. I still want to be a writer when I grow up, and I'm working on that. And it's growing up and becoming a writer, both. But it was her encouragement, because I'd been blue collar all my life. I was truck driving, ranching, mining, almost anything. And a lot of that was Route 66, oddly enough. Again, the Twilight Zone reference. Almost all of the stuff I did like that, it had a Route 66 component.
It's just amazing how pervasive it is. I want to save a little time. We're getting towards the end of the hour, and we want to talk about a certain thing that you asked specifically that I love to talk to my guests about. But let's just talk real quickly about the international component. Sometimes I've heard, when you go to a place on Route 66 and you look in the guest book, up to 50% of the people have come from other countries. I know these people, especially in Czechoslovakia, places like that, Japan. What does Route 66 represent to them?
The Great American Road Trip in general it's magical. But Route 66 has an infectious magic and enthusiasm because of the people. You can find more mom and pop stuff on US 6, 12, 50 than you can on 66, but you can't find this sense of community. You can't find the sense that this is America's longest small town. And starting with the American connection, unless you're about 70 years old, about my age, you don't have a real connection to Route 66 when it was 66. And yet you have people like yourself and Reese Martin and these people who have a passion. When you talk to the internationals, it's just as diverse, the reasons why. One of the most amazing stories about Route 66, what it meant. I was privileged to speak at the Second European Festival in Zlin, Czechia in 2018. And I was talking to a fellow about growing up behind the Iron Curtain, listening to Radio Free America, hearing that song, Route 66, watching bootleg copies of Easy Rider, the American Road Trip, Route 66 specifically, he said came to symbolize for his generation the freedom that the Statue of Liberty meant for a previous generation. I thought, man, that is just powerful.
That's my understanding. So, Jim, with the remaining time, you've been at this a long time, and it shows. And don't grow up too much. That's how you become a really great writer. We know that. 2 questions. First, any more books in you? What are you working on now?
Well, I got a project I've wanted to do for years, and but just back this up about being a writer when I grow up. Do you know what the definition of a writer is? It's somebody that you only make money from the written word, and you can still afford to eat every second day. And my books, one of the books I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I have some rough drafts done. I was shot down a lot when I started doing this initially in the 90s, but I think it might be time because the 250th anniversary of the United States. I have a book entitled Bathtubs, Bird Cages, and Chevrolet that I want to chronicle the people, tell the story of the early auto industry through the people, the failures, the crazy people, the eccentrics, the visionaries, the women that were pivotal in the early auto industry. And so how do we get bird cages and bathtubs and Chevrolet together? To be brief, in the 19 teens, the three leading luxury automobile manufacturers in the United States were Pierce Arrow, Peerless, and Packard. Pierce Arrow was the oldest of the companies. They had been around since the post-Civil War era, manufacturing bird cages and ice boxes and things of this nature. They morphed into automobiles, the bird cages. Bathtubs. David Buick was a Scotch immigrant, came to this country, and was brilliant. He was one of those unusual, rare people that was extremely brilliant, and he was dumber than a box of rocks. And every time the poor SOB's ship came in, he was down at the depot waiting for the train. He just kept missing it all the time. But he started a plumbing business, and he patented the method for affixing porcelain to cast iron. He gave us the cast iron bathtub. Wow. Chevrolet, and if you want to have some real fun with car people, if you're one of these guys that like to joust at windmills like Don Quixote and stir things, go to a car show and tell people that Chevrolet started as an import. Oh, that'll get them every time. But Louis Chevrolet was French. He was born in a section that later became Switzerland. He became a bicycle mechanic, a bicycle racer, and he started manufacturing bicycle components. And he was a pretty prolific mechanic and other things. And he was employed by a French automobile manufacturing company, De Bion. And then also he was employed by Fiat. And he came to the United States in the employ of De Dion as a mechanic. And he brought his brothers with him, Louis and Arthur. There was Louis, Arthur, and Gaston Chevrolet. And short version, long story, William Durant had bought out Buick and used Buick as the cornerstone to establish General Motors. To promote Buick, Durant established the first factory racing team. He hired the Chevrolet brothers. So that's how that goes.
Wow. Well, I will read that book. I will absolutely read that book. So, Jim, what we wanted to finish with tonight is very important to the audience, and that's staying relevant in this increasingly technological world. I've been in publishing for 30-something years now and seen immense changes on both sides, as a writer, as a publisher, as an editor, all that kind of stuff. So what are you doing to stay relevant, to take advantage of the technology? How has it benefited your reach and so on and so forth?
This is something that's really I've been giving a lot of thought to, especially as 70s looming at the top of the hill. When I started this writing stuff, I was using a 1948 Underwood typewriter. That's how old I am. As we age, we have a natural tendency to become rigid. I don't know about computers and I don't want to learn it. This kind of attitude. This isn't like it was when I was younger. Like it or not, the world changes. And no matter how important you are or how big you are, the world has a tendency to move on. You become irrelevant. Even if you're famous, it doesn't matter. You get marginalized. But if just because we're old, we're not dead. You have gifts, talents, passions, things you can do. And technology is the key. Don't be fearful. Learn new things. I'm never going to be able to do this computer stuff like some kid that grew up playing Oregon Trail. It's just not going to happen. But I can figure stuff out. So I put together the podcast. I love sharing America's story. I love telling people where to go. And more importantly, I'm used to eating on a regular basis. And to keep that going, we have to figure out how to adapt and change, how to combine these things. So I've learned how to do the podcast. I'm working on a YouTube channel. I built my own website. And you can do this. You can remain relevant. You can blend the past and the present. And this is another reason, not to be too long-winded, but this is another reason that I want to do this Bathtubs, Bird Cages, and Chevrolet book. I want to show the relevance of how people adapt. I want to give examples. Look at these people between 1885 and 1930, 1940. I mentioned the number of automobiles that were produced. It wasn't just the automobiles that was pushing the horse and carriage aside. Think of the infrastructure. Multi-family blacksmiths, carriage makers, wheelwrights, tossed out the window. If you didn't know how to drive in 1920, you could still make a living. How much harder was it in 1930? And if you were a blacksmith, a damn good blacksmith in 1910, how was your business in 1930? You had to adapt and change. I'll give you a short version because I know we don't want to, beat our gums too much, but one of my favorite characters about adapting, and that applies to today just as it did 100 years ago, was a fellow named Ezra Meeker. Keep in mind, he was born in 1830. The short version of this story is, as a young man, 1850-ish, with a wife and a newborn infant, he went to Oregon, over the Oregon Trail, with 2 oxen and a cart. Made a fortune with hops, growing hops. Lost a fortune because of hops aphids. Created a method of dehydrating fruits and vegetables and packaging them in waxed cardboard waterproof containers. And during the Klondike Gold Rush, 1890s period, he and his son took a ton of this stuff into the Klondike and made money. This is 1890s. He was born in 1830. In 1906, very much like today with Route 66, he was worried that we were moving so fast forward, we were forgetting the past. He wanted to commemorate the Oregon Trail. So he got himself an ox cart, 2 oxen, started traveling along the Oregon Trail and roads that had replaced the Oregon Trail, speaking engagements across the country, calling attention to the Oregon Trail and its importance. Met with Teddy Roosevelt, went all the way to Washington, D.C., turned around and went home. 1910, he did it again, coast to coast in an ox cart, and got Congress to approve the commemorative Oregon Trail $50. 1914, the National Automobile Company outfitted him with an automobile. He went on a nationwide touring campaign in an automobile. In 1919, he was born in 1830. 1919, he is helping his son in the Cajon Pass build the first service station and garage complex along the National Old Trails Road, which became Route 66, in the Cajon Pass. In 1924 or 25, one of the Wright brothers invited him to Dayton, Ohio, for a pioneers convention kind of thing, talking about the past, how we blend the past, the present, the future, like being relevant today. Buddy of his had a World War I military surplus airplane, so they flew to Ohio. 1929, Henry Ford is looking for a marketing campaign for the new Model A Ford. Guess who he called?
Wow.
Ezra Meeker. This guy was born in 1830. So this is just as relevant then as it was then. Now and then. You can stay relevant. You've got to stay relevant. And that means studying, reading, always learning, be fascinated by things, talk to people. More importantly, listen to people. Yeah.
Folks, we are going to end on that. Well, I'm lying. Jim, tell folks about Jim Hinckley's America and your podcast, Coffee with Jim, please.
Jim Hinckley's America started off simple enough. I was trying to figure out how to sell books, and it morphed into something kind of a full network: social media, Instagram, YouTube channel, and then the podcast a year or so ago. And I don't claim to understand how all these magical things work. I'm most comfortable in the world of Model A Ford technology. And so what I generally do with computers is I push buttons till something works or breaks. and somehow I ended up creating a podcast, a weekly live stream podcast that had 20,000 downloads last month, picking up steam. And it was none of these things were ever meant to be a Jim show. It's about putting the spotlight on other people, providing inspiration, inspiration for road trips, inspiration for community development, inspiration for building a sense of community. So we talked to all kinds of diverse people, and nobody told me that live stream is a bad way to do this because of technical problems and editing issues. I didn't know better. So I do it live stream on Sunday mornings, and then I publish it on various platforms. And this year, the program was designated an official Route 66 Centennial program. So it's kind of honored by that.
Yeah, and well deserved. I guess because I'm an old theater guy, and sometimes I'll do films, but I love to go back to the theater. I love the live rush. I mean, I when I have to pre-tape this show because someone's in another country and it just doesn't align or the schedule gets messed up, I just don't feel the same. I like the live. So I'm glad you had an opportunity to be on the other side of the mic and inspire people and do what you do for them.
Thank you.
This has been an amazing hour and 5 minutes. Thank you so much. I look forward quite selfishly to talking with you and seeing you more. And thank you so much. So everyone, we'll be back next week with filmmaker, award-winning filmmaker. She's up to really great stuff. Karen Lutz. I have, let me see, what else do I have for you folks coming up in the new year? We're going to have someone who goes into the Akashic Records and talks about what's going on there. A wonderful man, Jack B. Alec, who wrote a book called, Jim, I think you'd be interested in this, Lost in Time. And it's a forgotten knowledge. And we think we invented the fountain pen in the 1800s. No, they had it thousands of years ago. Lost libraries, time castles, capsules. Who else did I have for you? Oh, I'm reading a book now about, it's a very audacious, sad to say, but for peace and unity in the world. So then I have a 3-time Emmy-winning director is going to be on the show and an Oscar-nominated filmmaker. So I'm excited about 2026. It's going to be our 6th anniversary of the podcast. So, Jim, thank you for spending time with us. And everyone, good night. Peace. Thank you. And we hope to see you on Route 66.
Take care. Thank you, Joey.